Hey, Honorée, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you back. Yeah. So I know I introduced you before, but I'd like to do it again. Honorée Corder is the author of 20 books, including a couple new ones since last time we interviewed you.
Yeah.
One called You Must Write a Book, Vision to Reality, and another one called Prosperity for Writers. Honorée coaches business professionals, writers, and aspiring nonfiction authors who want to publish their books to bestseller status, create a platform, and develop multiple streams of income. So, Honorée, let's talk about your latest book. I mean, it's called You Must Write a Book, right? So why? Why did you label it that?
Well, funnily enough, it was the working title for the longest time. And then people just started saying, when is You Must Write a Book going to be finished? Because I couldn't come up with a better title. The reason I wrote You Must Write a Book is for a few reasons. One, I think every professional, every person really would benefit from writing a book because of the journey you go on personally and professionally when you write a book. And also having your own book replaces your business card, and it basically kind of closes the loop in someone's mind, whether or not you're the person they should hire.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that in more detail, because I think there's so many benefits to writing a book that a lot of people, like, you don't understand it until you actually write the book, until you actually
Right.
it and have it published, right?
Sure.
So, beyond building your authority and credibility in your field, things that everyone knows, what to you are some of the most profound, personal impacts that actually writing a book can help you achieve?
Well, so I can speak from my own personal experience. When I was just a coach and a speaker, air quotes, right? I had a conversation with Mark Victor Hansen, who listeners would know is the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series, among many others. And he asked me what I did. And I said, oh, I'm a coach and a speaker. And he was like, okay, well, basically it was not impressive. He's like, everybody's a coach and a speaker. You have to have a book. You need to be what you said, the authority, the no questions asked expert in the room. And the way to do that is to have a book. So when I published my first book, not only did it become an income stream, and this was really right before Kindle was released by Amazon, and maybe like the first few adopters, the people that buy something right away, right? Those first adopters had Kindles and they were reading the book on Kindle, but I sold thousands of copies of that book and created an income stream. Also, what I didn't realize at the time, it wasn't until I experienced someone saying, do you have a business card? And I would say, oh, I have a business card. And I also have a book if you'd like that. And their eyes would get big as saucers and they would say, you're an author? That's amazing. That's the coolest thing. I've always wanted to write a book. And all of a sudden, we went from being strangers to having this common interest. And I was able to open a dialogue with people, and then they would read my book and it would answer the questions for them. Was she the right person? Was she the right person for me? Were we philosophically aligned? Was she the right person for me to hire? Did she have the knowledge base that I need? All of those things. The book was basically, my portable sales pitch, if you will, without being that directly. It was indirectly my sales pitch, and I got a lot of business from it. So it was very cool to not only be able to open a conversation with someone, have a conversation with someone, engage with someone in business, also become friendly with them and have things to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and the other great thing about having that book instead of a business card is when you give someone a business card, they're probably just going to throw it away. They're not going to throw away a book. And if they do decide to read it, you're talking to them through that book and like continuing the conversation with them. And, basically in essence, like educating them and selling them on what you do. So the next time they pick up the phone to call you, they're like pre-sold already.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Your business card, sadly, your business card, your brochure, your tricolor folder that you've so lovingly printed out and so expensively printed out, right, is ultimately going to be a piece of trash waiting to happen. Very rarely do I come across someone who will admit that they've actually thrown a book away. More likely what happens is they donate it, they find a loving home for it on their bookshelf, or they pass it on to someone who would benefit from having the book. So it doesn't become a piece of trash. It's a perpetual marketing piece.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the cool thing about the used book market is that, it can go to a used bookstore or a thrift store or somewhere, and it can go into multiple homes, and your one book can be read by multiple people.
Oh yes, it's never going to stop working for you. Your book is going to continue to live on. I mean, if someone holds onto your book and they use their little highlighter marker and they mark it up and they make notes in the margins, that's wonderful. But if it continues into the world, it can be read by an unlimited number of people. It can travel to places you would never go and reach people you might not otherwise be able to connect with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So in the book, you talk about, creating multiple streams of income from a book. So can you give us some examples of how that actually happens?
Sure. So the content of a book can be multi-purposed. I call it the wheel of fortune, right? So the center of the wheel is the content of the book, but each spoke can be either all of or some of the content reproduced into coaching, speaking, consulting, a workbook, a companion guide, a self-study course, an audio course. I mean, the sky is the limit. It's basically what can you come up with and what can you handle. So taking either a piece of the book or all of the book and repurposing it is very common. So you mentioned my book, Prosperity for Writers. The original group of people that I worked with to write that book were engaged in a course. So I actually made money to write the book. I sold the course. People participated in it, and then I used their stories and the content of the course to write the book. Then the first 100 readers of that book reached out to me, my advanced review team, and they said, the thing we really wanted when we were writing this book was a journal so that we could do the exercises. And so I said, all right. So I created the Prosperity for Writers Productivity Journal, which is a separate product. And I was careful to not make the mistake I've seen some other authors make, which is to just have the content be exactly the same. So then people feel like they gave you their money twice, but they didn't benefit twice. So I actually went and got new stories, put in some new information, but also put in the original exercises from the original book so that they would have a place to do those exercises. But they would feel like they purchased a new book and actually got a new book in a way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So essentially what you're doing is you're taking like the main idea or the main premise of the book and think about how many different ways can I add value to my audience using this information? How can I make it easier for them to consume, like the workbook and so forth?
Right. And it doesn't really even have to become a different product. Actually, your book is multiple streams of income if you publish it in all the ways you can publish it. So for example, you could have an ebook because some people prefer to read on their devices. Some people will say to you, I really just like to hold the book in my hands. And so of course you need to have a paper copy, hardcover, paperback, or both. And then lots of people are moving to consuming their content with audio. And so having an audio version of the book then means that you have 3 streams of income from that same exact material, the ebook, the audiobook, and the paperback book. If you're able to create super fans, they will have all 3 versions of your book. I have all 3 versions of some books, actually.
Definitely. So I wonder if you could share some kind of numbers around, your different formats. So for the ebooks, print books, and audiobooks, which format do you sell the most copies in or earn the most royalties from, and which one would you say is the least?
It really depends on the title, because I write in different verticals. And so I write business books. I have a book series for single moms. I have a book for single dad. I write books in the divorce vertical. And now I write some books for writers. So I have Prosperity for Writers, and then You Must Write a Book is obviously for aspiring writers or people who want to write a book. So those are different verticals, and in every vertical the numbers vary. So some of my books, like my divorce books, for example, I sell a lot of those in print. For some reason, I think they're gifts, right? I think someone realizes their friend's going through a divorce and they buy them the books. I sell a lot more print books than I do the ebooks. I sell a lot of Vision to Reality audiobooks. That seems to be a really popular audiobook, but I still sell a fair amount of ebook and paperback for that also. So honestly, it really just depends on the vertical. For your audience, it will depend on what vertical they're writing in, and making sure that each of the books are what I like to call indistinguishable from traditional publishing, making sure that it's a nice read, whether they hold it in their hands or they're reading it on their device or they're listening to an audio production. It needs to be as professional as possible.
Absolutely. Quality is key for sure. So why do you think that everyone who's a business professional should write a book?
Because everyone says they're the best at what they do, and a book leaves no question. A book is, when there are two financial advisors standing right next to each other, and they will both say, I'm going to get you the best return on your investments, and I'm your guy, I'm your gal. The guy who says, I don't have a business card, but I have a book, here you go. It is more effective. A book is more effective than a fancy degree or a shiny certification. There is really nothing quite as impressive as a book still, even today, even with the fact that you can self-publish and have been able to self-publish really for more than a decade. And some people have been self-publishing for a lot longer. It's just become much easier and more accepted to self-publish recently, in maybe the last 5 years. There's still lots of people that are not going to write a book. And if you take the time to write a book and you do it really well, it's going to represent you in a way that you can't even possibly begin to imagine, and is going to create opportunities and relationships and conversations that you wouldn't otherwise have as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, it's like anything in life that's complex, like writing a book. Not everyone's going to do it. Like say 70% of people want to write a book someday in their life. Sure. The vast majority of people are just never going to do that. So if you're like a financial advisor, for example, and you actually write a book, you're probably one of the only ones, or if not the only one in your area, who's a financial advisor in your field who's actually written the book.
Or even in your zip code. Even if you are one of lots of financial advisors and there are, let's say in the Austin area, 5 financial advisors who have written a book, write one in a specific niche area and then just dominate that market. Just be the guy or gal who knows every single thing about that particular niche, and then leave no question because you're handing someone a book, following up with a note and a book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Have coffee and lunch with a book, right? And then watch what happens next. It's kind of cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it just makes sense. Like, it just sets you at a whole nother level. So in that eye of that prospect or potential customer or client or business partner or colleague, investor, whoever it is, when you hand them that book, they just see you at a totally different level. Rather than just being like, oh, you're someone trying to sell me. Oh, no, you're this expert who I can learn from and actually get knowledge from.
Right. And I said this before, but it's really important that people will take your book and read it. And it's important that your book is done well, and it highlights your personality and your perspective and your philosophy. Someone will take that book and read it and then feel like they're having a conversation with you, and it will answer for them whether they want to continue that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So how does someone actually go about the process of writing a book? You talk about like crafting a book. What does that mean?
Well, crafting a book is taking the time to put some forethought into what you're going to put in your book. So a lot of people don't know where to start, and there are a few things to do to start. I don't know which one is exactly the first one. They all kind of go hand in hand when I'm thinking about a book. The first thing is, what problem do you solve, or what solution are you providing to either, you're either taking someone out of pain, preventing pain, giving them pleasure, all of the above. So what is that special piece of advice, or those pieces of advice that you give to people on a regular basis? And then ask yourself the question, who is the ideal reader? Also known as, if you're using your book as a business card to generate business for you and not just a revenue stream, then who is the person you want to pick up your book and hire you? What is your avatar? And profile your avatar. So I give examples of that in the book, and I walk them through that process of what are the questions that you have to answer, and who are you writing the book for? So in my book, my avatar is a guy named Eric Negron. He's a longtime client and good friend of mine who I've been saying for years, Eric, you need to write a book. And I literally wrote the book with Eric in mind. So why this is important is because some people will say, well, maybe I should include this in the book, or maybe I should include that in the book. And when you have an avatar in mind, when I was writing, I was just writing to Eric. Now, that doesn't mean that Eric doesn't represent millions of people, because he actually does. But I was writing just to him. So I wouldn't give advice to someone named Susan over here because she doesn't apply. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it kept me very focused in on the road of writing the book and staying very specific on the path of what advice would I give Eric if he were sitting in front of me. And that's what I put in the book. Mm-hmm. It just happens to apply to lots of other people, which will also work for your listeners.
Absolutely. So, I mean, one of the big mistakes I think a lot of first-time authors make is that they try to put like everything they know into their book. right? And so like literally everything you know in this book. And so it ends up being in 200, 300, 400 pages and not really well organized. So I'm curious, when you talk about crafting a book and really organizing your thoughts, how do you go about actually outlining and structuring and planning the book?
Well, I have a complete conversation in my mind with my avatar. So I open the conversation. So what do you need to know about writing a book? And the first thing I had to do was convince Eric, at least in the book, right, that he needed to write the book. I needed to remove all the excuses around a book. I don't have the time to write a book. I don't have enough knowledge or experience or education or, I don't know what I would say. And then I don't know when I would write the book. When would I write it? And if I wrote the book, then what do I need to do to make sure that it is a quality product? Like, what are all the boxes I need to check? And then finally, where do I sell this book? Right? Where do I sell it and how do I sell it? How do I use it to earn money and how do I use it to engage new clients to earn even more money? So I answered all of those questions and I kind of closed the loop, realizing that there would be lots of other questions that would need to be answered and perhaps I could answer those in another book. I actually decided to do a companion guide to You Must Write a Book called I Must Write a Book. And it's really the action guide where they can go and say, okay, here are my ideas for what I think I should write a book about, and here's who my avatar is. So they can actually a workbook, a big workbook that they can actually dive into. I couldn't put all of those things into the original book. There just wasn't enough space. And frankly, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Is I see a 300-page book and I think, maybe not. Or it's going to take me a long time to get all the way through that, or it's so complex and complicated that I just don't even know if I want to dive into it. So I tried to make it so that writing a book wasn't such an overwhelming task. And that would be important for your listeners because they probably have some complicated and complex knowledge. You want to just take it to some bite-sized piece for the reader. Let them know that you're the expert. Open the conversation. Tell them everything they need to know and close the loop. And then if you have other ideas, then guess what? You're probably going to get the fever, which is I'm going to write another book. So all the people that I work with to help walk them through the process of writing a book go, well, in my next book, and the first time they say it, I always kind of go, I'm sorry, would you repeat that? Because they weren't even sure they were going to write one book, and then they're not even done with the first book, and they're already thinking, okay, well, in my next book, I want to do this, which is kind of fun, a fun part of the process.
Absolutely. So one of the challenges I notice a lot of people have with the book is that, they get inspired, right? You get inspired with this idea and you just sit down to write, but you haven't really organized it or planned it out very well. And so people end up maybe writing, hundreds of pages without really a clear plan. And they haven't thought through like that process that you mentioned where, talking to your avatar, asking them what they need and so forth. And so I was wondering if you can share some stories of people who have really kind of messed up at that first stage of writing a book. And so that people can listen now who want to write their first book, that they actually spend the time planning that they need to get the job done right.
Well, great question. In fiction writing, there are the pantsers, right? So people who just write by the seat of their pants. And then there are the plotters. And there's this great divide between the pantsers and the plotters, because the pantsers will say, well, it's the story and it's happening in my mind. And the plotters will say, well, I can more easily get through a story, more effortlessly get through a story, and more effectively get through a story when I sit down and plot where the characters are going to go. How this applies to nonfiction is that if you just sit down and you start going, bleh, but you don't have a clear outline that you're working from, or you haven't engaged the services of someone like a content editor to really make sure that there's content development that can happen. You can go to someone who's really good, who's done this process. I actually have editors that I work with, and they do this content development that can make sure that you're closing all the loops first before you write all those pages. Because not unlike our conversation, which kind of can be all over the place, right? I can go off on a tangent any moment. Right? You're like, that's not the question I asked. People do that in their heads when they're writing also. So sometimes someone will call me and say, okay, I want you to help me to launch my book to bestseller status. And I'll say, okay, great. Let me see what you've got. And then I give them the hashtag hot mess and I say, okay, wait a minute. So we actually need to do some content development. What they're doing sadly, is they're spending their wheels. They're wasting a lot of time and energy when, in fact, if they spent some time and plotted out what they wanted to write, what problem they were solving, what pleasure they were going to give their clients, or both, right, then they could write directly to that. So that's a huge mistake that I see people making, is they don't stick to the topic at hand. They don't stick to the task at hand. And then they cost themselves a lot of money because editors are not cheap.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So they're sending a manuscript to someone, and then another mistake along that same lines is they are using someone who's an air quotes editor. So they were an English teacher at a high school, or they have some sort of English degree that did not make them an actual editor. So my advice to someone is, if you're hiring someone to do your editing, make sure that on their tax return where it says, what is your occupation, that the little word in there is actually editor. That's what they do for a living. That's not their kind of side project.
Right, absolutely. You want someone who is a total professional who really, they're seeing your exact problems, 100 times before they know exactly what to do.
Correct. Well, and I made every mistake under the sun with my first book. I didn't get an editor. And then when I finally did get an editor, it was someone who was an English teacher for 30 years. And she was very good at correcting spelling mistakes, but she wasn't quite helpful in helping me to become a better writer, which is what a good editor does, or helping me to structure sentences in such a way that they make sense. I can write a 1-sentence, 6-line paragraph like no one you've ever met. But I'm not always speaking clearly or effectively in those paragraphs, and my editors are able to turn that one run-on sentence into 3 beautiful pieces of prose that make me seem very smart and eloquent, and that's their job, right? So your job as the writer is to get the information out on paper. The editor's job is to kind of go behind you with their Zamboni and make you seem like a brilliant writer. Mm-hmm. So I had a guy I was dating design a book cover, and I had a woman who was an English teacher do my editing. And so you can only imagine what my first book might have looked like if any of them were not burned.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great point about editors, because I think a lot of people, if you're a first-time author, you haven't been in the industry before, you don't really understand. It's like there's so many people who say, I'm an editor, and maybe they're great with grammar and spelling and syntax, but it takes so much more than that to create a good book and good writing. And you have to understand the content. You have to understand how it flows, the organization, the word usage.
Correct.
It's so important, and it's not something that someone can get, by being an English teacher or a professor. It's something someone has to get by actually working on books and book after book after book to get that experience.
Yeah, so it's even something as interesting as, are you going to write FIRST for first, or are you going to use 1ST? And one is the standard official book on editing. I don't even know what it's called. And the other one is like an option, but you probably shouldn't do it. And so in my most recent manuscript, I just wrote 1ST. And so my editor wrote a note and said, so are we following the standard rules, or are we creating something new? I wouldn't even know what the book was, right? I'm not an editor. So unless someone's an editor by training and they've really had, gotten their chops as a journalist, right, and really done some serious editing, they're probably not the right person. And you're just going to have to be prepared to pay for that, and graphic design and copywriting and layout, in order to produce a quality product. But I promise you, it's worth taking the time to either save up or just going ahead and investing in that. It's really worth it. I promise.
Mm-hmm, definitely. So you talk about the importance of writing every day, and something that I talk about a lot with my audience. It's something that is almost kind of made fun of when people say, oh, you need to write every day to be a writer, because it's like everyone says it, right? But why is that so important?
Well, for me, it's important because I don't know, maybe I'm old. I need to remember what I said yesterday by tomorrow. If I wait until the day after, I might have forgotten. I think that when you're in the flow state, that comes about from having a regular writing practice. I was listening to the 8 Questions podcast, which was hosted this particular time by Sean Platt, who's the self-publishing podcast guy also. And he was saying that he writes 7 days a week because that keeps him in the flow state. And he said that he didn't know how people could take off weekends or even a month to go on vacation and not write, because he said he can write 2,500 words an hour if he does it day in and day out. If he takes a few days off, writing 500 words in an hour is painful and brutal. And I guess it's, you have to breathe regularly, that you have to work out regularly. And writing is, I think, one of those things that if you don't do it consistently, your muscles are not as strong. Your writing muscles are not as strong. Your creativity is not as powerful, and you're not as effective and efficient as you could be. And so I think everyone says it because it's kind of true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point, that you're just more effective when you write every day, right? Because you're not trying to remember what you wrote about last time. All the ideas are fresh in your mind. Your memory is still good. And so you're not wasting time with all the back and forth and the researching what you wrote last week and that kind of thing.
Oh, and if I put down a manuscript for too long, I literally have to go back and start at the beginning because I've forgotten what did I talk about before? And sometimes my editor will say, you talked about that in chapter 3 and again in chapter 8. And I said, well, that's because chapter 3 and chapter 8 were like 2 months apart from each other. So even the consistent writing habit doesn't always make sure that you aren't missing something. Mm. And it doesn't have to be, writing does not have to be like working out. They say if you do 50-pound kettlebell swings every day, that's the equivalent of running 6 miles or something like that, right? It doesn't have to be that you run 6 miles. You can just go do 50 swings and that might take you 15 minutes. The same is with writing. If you just crack open your computer and you write for 15 minutes or 30 minutes every day, you're going to keep the pump primed. It doesn't have to be, I need to set a block of time aside that's 2 hours long. You can really do it in small chunks and still keep the momentum going, which I think is important to note.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and I think it's the same kind of principle applies to so many different creative processes. Like if you're, starting a business, or if you're creating a workshop or a seminar or a video training course, whatever big creative project you're creating, if you take a week off or a month off or 3 months off in the middle, coming back to it, you're going to just be so much slower getting it done. It's not going to be as organized and as complete and as inspiring for you to actually get the work done as it would be if you said, hey, I'm going to, focus these next 30, 90, 180 days just on this one project and really get it done.
Correct. However, let us point out that life happens. And if by chance you were doing something pretty consistently for a couple of months and you set it down and you've been nervous to start, the best time to start is go ahead and just do it right now and get back in the momentum, because you'll be back in momentum before you know it. You're probably going to have a little pain on the way, but it's worth it to go ahead and get started again. So don't let our "you better write every day" mantra scare you away from picking up the baton where you left it if you have been away from a project for a little while.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Yeah. I mean, we all, like you said, life happens to all of us. We all, struggle with procrastination and laziness and, challenges and obstacles, right? I mean, everyone has that, no matter how successful we are.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that you're a parent. Are you a parent?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, I'm a parent and I know all of my friends that are parents. This is like week 2 of school or week 3 of school. And some people are like, woo, they're doing the Snoopy dance, right? The kids are back in school and now they can kind of get back to their routine, because there's a definite slowness and a lack of progress that happens. It's not even procrastination. It's just the clock ticks down before you know it during the summer, during holidays, when kids are sick, when you're sick, when there's another project that's going on. And so sometimes you just have to say it is what it is and I'm going to get back to it, and make it an appointment on your calendar and know it's going to be a week or a month before you get back to something, but make sure that you've made that commitment to yourself and you follow through.
Definitely.
Hang in there.
That's right. Perseverance will take you a very long way.
Correct.
Great. So in your book, you talk about creating a book title and creating a really good book title. And I think this is something that a lot of people get stuck on. Like, how do you actually create a good book title? And a lot of people, they just, the first idea they have in a shower, they just get that and they stick with that to the end. What is your process like for coming up with a book title?
Well, like I said, You Must Write a Book was a working book title until it was actually the book title. But the subtitle was Why Every Professional Should Write and Self-Publish a Book, and How to write a great one. And then I realized that there was no SEO, there was no keyword maximization in there. And I really needed to improve the subtitle. So for me, I run the subtitle, the title and the subtitle by my inner circle of super genius writer friends. What you're looking for when you're crafting a title is you want something that it is memorable, like Save the Cat. Save the Cat have you heard of Save the Cat?
No.
So you'll never forget it now. Save the Cat is the screenwriter's Bible, basically. If you are an aspiring screenwriter, you will read Save the Cat at some point. And even though I have never written a screenplay and don't ever plan to write a screenplay, when someone said, well, a really good reference guide for fiction writers is actually a screenwriter's book called Save the Cat. And then they explained that saving the cat was when you have the evil doer character in the screenplay save the cat, which is a nice thing. So you have to like the antagonist, right? A little bit. So you have to have them save the cat. So once they explained that, when it came time for me to decide that I wanted to write fiction, I went and bought the book Save the Cat because I never forgot it. So another memorable book title is The 4-Hour Workweek. I couldn't tell you what the subtitle is, even though it's great. I couldn't tell you what it is, but definitely when someone says, what's a really good success book? They're going to say The 4-Hour Workweek or Think and Grow Rich or Awaken the Giant Within. They're expressly telling you what they do, and they're memorable, so they're easy for people to pass on. When you're crafting your book title, you want the book title to tell people what they should do, as in you must write a book. And you want it to be memorable, so they don't have to think about what's that book title of that you should be reading. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then the title is what the book is about. The subtitle is the promise. What in nonfiction books, the subtitle is what is the promise that the reader will receive from reading the book? So you're going to tell them in the subtitle, what are the promises of the book? What do they get from reading the book? What do they get if they buy the book?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, I think that's so important that you really spend the time, coming up with multiple titles, testing out different titles and different subtitles, asking, people who are smart at marketing, who understand this stuff and branding, right? Like, what do you think is the best title? And really testing that and working on that, because it makes a huge, huge difference in your sales.
And remember to ask an expert. Back to the person who has editor on their tax return, you really want someone who understands marketing. The thing I see people do is they post their god-awful book cover on Facebook and they say, which one of these god-awful book covers should I use? And my answer is always none. Although someone tagged me on their book cover yesterday and said, Honorée, you're so great at this. What do you think? And I said, what's your email address? Because I would never call someone out and say, wow, that's a really bad book cover, like to embarrass them. But privately, I was able to send a message and make some suggestions. Mm-hmm. Make sure that when you're hiring someone or you're taking someone's advice, they are a professional, that they know what they're talking about, because it's very easy to ask people on Facebook, but unfortunately, the general population doesn't have the information that is needed to give you a really solid piece of advice.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And one of the things I noticed is that professionals are way more likely to, like you just did, to call someone out and to say, hey, this is not good enough. You need to do better. And you have to kind of put your ego aside.
Oh, yes.
You find that expert to really be coachable and really work with them, and really take their advice, because, people who just say, oh, no, my title is great. My book title is great. My editing is great. I don't need an editor. I don't need professionals. And they just go and publish. I don't know anyone who's done that, who didn't make changes later down the road that ever reached the kind of success they were looking for.
Right. And your book is going to languish in obscurity if you don't have, I think there are 4 really important things, right? Great editing, a great cover, great sales copy, and great layout, besides a great book, right? So those 4 things you have to invest in, and you have to invest in a professional. Otherwise, your book is going to languish in obscurity, and it's an exercise in futility. And I see so many people say, well, I only have X number of dollars for a book cover, or I'm just going to design it myself, or I can't afford an editor, or they don't even know what sales copy is, because I sure didn't. I mean, believe me, if there's a mistake I'm advising someone against, it's because I made the mistake, and it was my stupid tax, right? I paid extra to do what you said, which is fix it. Now I try to preempt it and do everything right from the very beginning. I didn't know that you needed special sales copy. I thought, oh, you just wrote a little book description and put it up on Amazon, and then the magic happened. It wasn't until I started reading professional copywriters and learning that sales copy is very important. So your book description, which is the same copy that's used for the sales description on Amazon, or very closely mirrors it, is so important, because it's really the verbal telling of what your book is about, and someone will use it to decide if they're going to purchase your book. So those are the 4 things that are really important, and it's important that you hire the very best person that you can and you put the money into it. And when someone says, I only have, $30 for my book cover, I say, well, then take that $30 and put it away, and then have it make friends until you can afford a good quality book cover. It will be worth it. It will pay dividends.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So in your book, you talk about a section called Let's Get Ninja.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, so you put all your money into your book, and then you're saying, okay, well, now how am I going to sell the book? And so ninja to me is just a way of thinking, right? And ninja is kind of my way of saying get scrappy, get creative, get your books into the hands of people who need to read them or who need to distribute them for me. So I have a whole bunch of ninja tactics, ways that when I didn't have a budget, or even now that I do, I still like to seed the market with bookmarks and postcards, and putting my books in Starbucks lending libraries, and giving 10 or 20 books to a professional who has my avatar as their client, so they can give the book away or buy copies of the book for me to give to their client. So it's really just another way of saying, think outside of the box. You have 2 distinct phases of the marketing of your book. And the first part is that pre-launch, right before the book goes live. And then the first 30 or 45 days after the book is live or has been launched, live on Amazon, live on Apple. And then you have phase 2, which is 45 days after you've launched your book until you die. Right. And so in phase 1, you're getting the word out. It's a brand new book. You're really excited. And then phase 2 starts. And that's when you need to do what I think are 7 things every day to market your book for as long as you're alive, as long as you're breathing.
Definitely. And I think you made kind of a great point there about you having a budget, right? Because I think, the important part of having a budget is like you talked about just before was, the layout, the editing, the sales copy, the cover design, right? That you need a budget for. You need that done professionally. But when it comes to marketing, I think too many authors just say, hey, I've got $1,000 or $500 or whatever number it is. And they just go and they try to spend it like as fast as possible, thinking that like the faster they spend money, the faster they're going to get sales. When in reality, most of the best marketing strategies that I've found are either free or very low cost. And it's really the time and effort you put into it that makes the difference, not the amount of money.
Correct. The relationships that you develop, the platform you develop, the followers you develop, the super fans that you develop. I give away books on Goodreads, which is free, except I have to pay postage and the cost of a book. So I'm probably all in $6, right? On any book, it's costing me $6 plus the time to order and then send out the books. And I send a handwritten note with every single free book. And I say, thanks for requesting my book. I hope you enjoy reading it. I hope you love it. And I can't wait to hear what you think. And here's my business card. In addition to my book. That takes time. That's time and effort. It's time and effort to set it up, to take it to the post office, to write the note. But I have super fans, and super fans, there's a book by Tim Grohl, Your First 1,000 Copies, I think, right? There are several books like that. Let's Get Digital, Let's Get Visible by David Gaughran. Like, those books are really great to read to help you to think about the long tail. It's not just launching your book in those first 30 or 45 days. It really is the whole rest of your life and the book's life that you can be focused on. And it's your book getting in the hands of readers. And then ultimately what you're doing is asking for their most valuable resource, not their money, their time. when someone sends me a copy of their book or asks to send me a copy of their book and say, would you read my book? What they're really asking for is between 2 and 6 hours of my time, which is incredibly valuable to me. And that's a big ask. If someone takes the time to read your book, that's a big deal. It's a big deal to me, and I really appreciate it, and I express that appreciation.
Definitely. And I think the other thing with this whole ninja kind of marketing strategy that we're talking about is that you have to be willing to keep doing it too, because if you just send one book out, like a one Goodreads giveaway to one person and write one handwritten note, maybe nothing will ever come of that. But I guarantee if you do it 10 times, 100 times, you keep doing the same thing over and over again, as long as it's something intelligent, which that strategy is because it gets you exposure, the more you do it, the better the results are going to be. But if people just do it one time and say, oh, that didn't work, well, they didn't really put enough effort in to make it work.
No, one of my major expenses is I order business cards from Moo Cards, and they're like the really good, thick business cards. And I buy the stationery from them. I put a significant amount of money and time into showing my appreciation and doing it over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm not counting the results that I get. I more believe in karma, right? What you put out comes back to you multiplied, and it doesn't always come back from where you gave it. It's like the old farming analogy. I'm from Ohio, right? I'm a farm girl from Ohio. And so my mentor used to say, when you're farming the front 20 acres, the back 80 are growing the crops. And it's not until you start farming those front 20 that the 80 in the back pop up, right? So you can't really say like, well, I did a favor for Tom, so I better get a favor back from Tom. It's more, I sowed some good karma seeds, and so good things are going to happen. And you just keep doing that over and over and over again, and don't be so attached to where you gave it or how much you gave. Just keep giving and giving and giving and being appreciative, and all the good stuff is going to happen for sure.
Absolutely. So we've got a couple minutes left. I want to talk about the book launches, right? You talked about like kind of phase 1, phase 2 of your book launch.
Yes.
So let's talk about phase 1. When you finally get your book published, how do you launch a book?
So it really changes every single book because the market is changing. Amazon changes, the algorithms change, whether I'm on only Amazon or I'm wide, right, on multiple platforms. So I take it book by book. Right now, my strategy is to assemble an advanced reader team. I have about 120 people on my advanced reader team. I give them access to my book free in advance, and I ask that they purchase the book for 99 cents. So I do a soft launch about 4 days before the hard launch date of my book. So I do pre-sale, and then it goes live to all the people that did the pre-sale, who bought the pre-sale. And I don't make a big hairy deal out of the pre-sale. I just kind of let people know, hey, the book's up for pre-sale, and your fans are going to go buy it. And then your super fans are going to be your advanced readers. And so for over the weekend prior to the launch of a book, I lower the price to 99 cents. I tell my team, and I go, shh, 99 cents. Go and buy it.
Don't tell anyone. Just buy it yourself.
Anybody, just buy it yourself, and then place your verified review, because you've already read the book over the past few weeks. And so then that next week, I'm launching the book and really, I hate to give the lawyer's answer of it depends for everything, but it really does depend on the book, the type of book, the market, all of those things, the time of year, how many other traditional publishers are publishing, right? Fall is more intense than summer or spring. So I might launch it at 99 cents. I might launch it at $2.99. And then I let it ride. So for maybe 3 to 5 days, it's going to sit at that $2.99, 99 cents, $1.99, $2.99, and then I'm going to slowly creep it up to its normal price as it rises in the ranks. All while I'm even writing the book, it's still in the final production stages, even while it's being proofread and even laid out by the designer, I'm scheduling podcasts, and I'm reaching out to the people that I wrote about in the book to say, hey, I wrote about you in my book. I'd love to send you a copy of the book. I'd love to be on your podcast. I'd love for you to tweet about it. I'd love to send you the hard copy so you can post a picture on Instagram or Facebook for me. I'm sending hard advanced reader copies to sometimes people in the media. It really just depends on the book, honestly. And then ultimately by 30 days or so, the book is at the full price, and hopefully it's been sent into the Amazon stratosphere by that point. Amazon's picked up on it, said, hey, this is a good income earner for us, and we're going to share it with people that you wouldn't be able to connect with otherwise. And it kind of takes on a life of its own through also bots and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So I don't know if I've only got a couple minutes left, but I know that there's, a big obstacle a lot of writers have, which is fear, right? And I know listening to you, I mean, you're so excited and so passionate, but you can also honestly be a little bit intimidating just because you know so much and you've written so many books and you have so much experience. But someone who's new, they don't have that experience. They don't have anything to look back in their life and say, oh, I've done this so I can write a book, right? There's all this fear around how much time it's going to take and if they have the money and the budget and the skills and experience and so forth. So what would you say to someone who's terrified to write a book or to get it published?
Please do it anyway. Please do it anyway. It'll be the best thing that you've ever done for yourself. You're going to go on a journey of discovery. You're going to be really flippin' proud of yourself when you finally hold that book in your hands. I mean, still to this day, 20 books later, the very first time I get a copy of the book in my hands, it takes my breath away. And the first time someone says, would you sign it for me? It's very cool. You deserve to have that same feeling. And then here's the other thing, who cares what anyone else thinks? If you have the desire to write a book, make a commitment to yourself to write even 50 words a day or 100 words a day until you have a manuscript, and then find an editor and find a designer and put one foot in front of the other. It might take you a year. It might take you 2 years. It might take you 5 years, or it might take you 6 months. It doesn't really matter. Give yourself the gift of writing the book that you have inside of you. It'll be the best thing that you ever do. And you said it at the very beginning, Tom, right? Until you've actually done it, you don't really know how cool it is. But my life is so much better and more enriched because I took that gamble. And I really did have a bonfire with my first book because I didn't even have a podcast. There weren't podcasts in 2004, at least not that I knew about, that I could listen to, that I could say, oh, right, an editor. I didn't even know. I didn't even know to have an editor. Forget about good design and layout and all that stuff, right? I had no idea. So there's plenty of resources. There's no rush, and it will be one of the best things that you ever followed through and did. And I hope if you have a question, you'll send it to me or to Tom or to some other expert and let us answer it for you. And let us be a guiding light as opposed to someone that you look at and say, well, I could never do that. It's if anything, we are the living proof that you can do it. And I don't want to say should, because that's not the right word, but you could do it if you really wanted to. There's no reason not to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you focus on the next step and you ask for help when you get stuck, that's how you keep moving forward and make that progress and get past that fear.
Totally. And I actually got hired yesterday by someone who was charged, this will make you die. She was charged $60,000 to publish her book, and it was wrong. The inside of the book isn't correct. The published versions of the book are not linked on Amazon because the person who published it was their first self-publishing project, and they had the nerve to charge her $60,000. And I said, well, if you spend an hour on the phone with me, I'm going to tell you all the stuff you need to do to redo it so that it's done correctly, so you actually make some money on this. This is awful.
Yeah.
So, at least you're not.
That's rough.
Right?
Yeah. Don't make that mistake.
Don't make that mistake. Yeah. Maybe hire someone, but don't hire someone for whom it's their first circus. Their first.
Well, Honorée, it's been a pleasure having you. You shared just some awesome information with us. I really appreciate it. So where can folks find out more about your book and what you're up to?
Sure. So honoreecorder.com/you must write a book is going to take you just directly to that book, or you can just make a stop at honoreecorder.com and then navigate your way around from there. And then I'm everywhere on social media as at Honorée. So Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all of that. I'm just at Honorée. So I'd love to hear from anybody.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here, Honorée. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.